There's something you need to know about Eckhart Tolle, something he never fully revealed, and when you discover it, you'll understand why your life will never be the same. For 2,000 years, a flame burned silently. In the forgotten monasteries of Syria, in the icy caves of Tibet, in the hearts of Christian contemplatives, the official church preferred to keep secret. This flame carried a knowledge, a secret so powerful it could dissolve the very fabric of reality. As you know it, and Eckhart Tolle, he found that flame. But let's start with what truly matters. Have you ever felt that restlessness? That nagging sense that there's something more? That you're only living on the surface of who you truly are? That restlessness isn't a flaw, it's a calling. It's the same force that led St. John of the Cross to write about the dark night of the soul. The same thirst that consumed Meister Eckhart until he discovered what he called the unfathomable depth of God. The same spiritual hunger that guided Teresa of Avila through the inner sanctums of her own consciousness. They knew something the organized religions didn't want the common people to discover. And here's the first clue to the secret. It's not about believing. It was never about blind faith or dogma. It was about direct experience, dissolution. Dying while still alive, the mystics discovered there's a veil, thin as silk, invisible as the air you breathe. This veil separates who you think you are from who you truly are. And Tolle, he passed through that veil. At 29, sitting on a park bench in London, Eckhart experienced what medieval contemplatives called mystical death. Not the death of the body, the death of the false self, the total dissolution of the constructed identity. But here's what no one tells you about this experience. It's not accidental. Mystics developed specific methods to induce it, techniques guarded as the most precious secrets of spiritual orders. St. Francis didn't just find God by chance. He applied specific practices of self-emptying that came from the Desert Fathers of the 4th century. Teresa of Avila didn't have mystical visions because she was special. She followed a precise inner map, secretly passed down through generations of contemplatives. And what Tolle did was translate that map into the language of today. The first secret he deciphered is this: the ego is not you. It's an illusion so convincing you've spent your entire life believing in it, like an actor who's forgotten he's acting. But the mystics knew this for centuries. John of the Cross called the ego disordered self-love. Meister Eckhart described it as the self that needs to die so that the true self can be born. The difference is they used religious language. Tolle used psychological language, but they're talking about the same thing. And here comes something that will blow your mind. This discovery isn't optional. It's not a spiritual luxury for people who have plenty of time. It's an evolutionary necessity. You feel it, don't you? That growing pressure inside you. As if something wants to emerge, but you can't identify what. As if you were pregnant with a version of yourself that hasn't been born yet. The mystics called this the inner Christ wanting to be born. Jung called it the individuation process. Tolle calls it the awakening of consciousness. Different words, same reality, but prepare yourself for something unsettling. Because the second secret Tolle decoded from the mystics goes against everything you've learned about spirituality. It's not about being a better person. It's not about accumulating spiritual accomplishments like medals. It's not about controlling your thoughts or emotions. It's about realizing that who you think you are is a fantasy. Teresa of Avila discovered this in the 4th inner sanctum, when she realized that the person who was seeking God didn't exist. There was only the seeking, only the movement of consciousness knowing itself. Meister Eckhart expressed this even more radically. God cannot be born in the soul until the soul dies to itself. Translated, true consciousness cannot emerge while the false identity is in command. And Tolle, he lived this literally. That night in London, the Eckhart, who had suffered from depression for years, simply disappeared. What emerged wasn't an improved version of Eckhart. It was something completely new, something that was always there, but hidden under layers of conditioning. Now you might be thinking, this is too extreme. I don't want to die to myself, I just want to feel better. And that's okay. Resistance is natural. It's the ego defending itself, like a parasite that senses its host is about to discover its presence. But here's the cosmic irony the mystics loved. The more you try to protect the false self, the more you suffer. The more you cling to the constructed identity, the more empty it becomes. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The more force you use, the faster it escapes. And that brings us to the third secret, the most practical of all. The mystics discovered there's a portal, a secret door that's always open, but you don't see it because you're looking in the wrong direction. This portal isn't in the future. It's not in some special state of consciousness you need to reach. It's not hidden in sacred books or complicated practices. It's here, now, in the present moment, but not in the way you imagine. When Tolle talks about the power of now, he's not talking about paying attention to the present. Anyone can do that. He's talking about something far more radical. He's talking about realizing that you are the present, that your true nature is the very consciousness that's reading these words right now. The Desert Fathers knew this. They developed a practice called heartfelt prayer. It wasn't a prayer asking God for something. It was the recognition that God was praying through them, that they were the very movement of divine consciousness knowing itself. Rumi expressed this poetically. You are not merely a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in every drop. But let me ask you a question that cuts to the chase. What's the difference between you reading these words now and you dreaming that you're reading these words? Think about it for a moment. In the dream, you completely believe it's real. You have thoughts, emotions, sensations. You react to the events of the dream as if they were absolutely true. Only when you wake up do you realize it was just a dream. And who was dreaming? Consciousness. Always consciousness. The mystics discovered that waking life is the same process. You are consciousness dreaming, it's a person. And spiritual awakening is waking up within the dream, continuing to dream, but knowing it's a dream. And this is where Eckhart Tolle becomes revolutionary, because he didn't just describe this realization, he showed how to live from it, how to function in the world, being aware that you are consciousness itself functioning through a human form, how to have relationships, work, daily challenges from this place of wisdom. Ancient mystics more often than not withdrew from the world. Tolle brought the mystique into the world, but there's a catch, a trap you need to know about before diving deeper into this journey. The ego is clever. It will try to transform even spiritual awakening into another identity, another story about who you are. I am an awakened person. I practice presence. I understand Tolle's teachings. Boom. You've just created a spiritual ego. More subtle, more sophisticated, but still ego. The mystics knew this trap intimately. St. John of the Cross wrote about it as the subtle hooks of spiritual self-love. Teresa of Avila warned against the illusions of the early inner sanctums. And what they discovered was this: true awakening isn't something you possess, it's something you are possessed by. It's not you who awakens, it's consciousness awakening to itself through you. And when this happens, something extraordinary is revealed, something that will completely change your perspective on suffering, on relationships, on the purpose of life. Because there's a fourth secret, a secret within the secret. And it is this: what you call your problems aren't system bugs. They are features. Every crisis you've faced, every moment of profound pain, every dark night of the soul, every time you felt you were losing yourself. These were invitations. Invitations for the false identity to unravel and for something greater to emerge. The mystics knew that suffering isn't the opposite of awakening, it's the fuel of awakening, not because suffering itself is good, but because it reveals the illusion. It shows where you're identifying with something that is not you. Tolle discovered this firsthand. His profound depression wasn't an obstacle to his realization. It was the pressure needed for the shell of the false self to crack, like a seed that needs the darkness and pressure of the earth to sprout. And now you're at the same crossroads that all genuine seekers eventually find themselves at. You can continue trying to improve the person you think you are, polish the ego, make it more spiritual, more conscious, more enlightened, or you can take the leap that the mystics took, the leap that Tolle took that night in London, the leap out of identification with anything that can be observed and into the realization that you are the observer itself. But here's the final secret of the first part of this revelation, the secret that will prepare you for the deepest transformation of all. This leap doesn't happen through effort. It doesn't happen through complex practices or rigorous disciplines. It happens through surrender. Surrender to the truth that you were never who you thought you were. Surrender to the possibility that everything you believed about yourself may have been a story. And when this surrender happens, when you stop fighting the river and allow it to carry you, then you discover what the mystics guarded for 2,000 years. You discover that there was never anything to be found, because you always were what you were looking for. But how exactly does this work in practice? How do you live this realization without losing your sanity? How do you integrate this mystical wisdom into your modern daily life? And most importantly, what is the final secret that Tolle deciphered from the medieval contemplatives? The secret that can change not only your individual experience, but your understanding of all of reality. That's what we're going to explore now, in the final revelation of this journey into the heart of mystical wisdom, where the deepest veils finally fall, and where you discover who you truly are when all masks are removed. Deep breath. Because what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you thought you knew about reality. There's a manuscript kept in the library of St. Catherine's Monastery on Mount Sinai, written by a monk named Evagrius Ponticus in the 4th century. And in this manuscript is the key that Tolle rediscovered 1,600 years later. Evagrius discovered something he called gnosis, not intellectual knowledge, but direct knowledge of the nature of the mind. And what he saw was this: the mind is not yours. It never was. The mind is like a radio picking up frequencies. And you are not the radio. You are the silent space where the waves move. Tolle expresses this more simply. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes the thoughts. But here's where things get really interesting, because Evagrius discovered something more, something that the Gnostics of the early centuries knew, but which was suppressed by the official church. He discovered that there are 3 levels of illusion, like 3 superimposed veils obscuring your true nature. The first veil is the personal ego, the story you tell about who you are. Your memories, your traumas, your dreams, your fears. Tolle calls this the pain body. The second veil is identification with the human species, the belief that you are fundamentally separate from the rest of existence, that there's a you in here and a world out there. But the third veil, this is the subtlest. It's the identification with individual consciousness itself, the belief that there's a conscious self having experiences, and when this third veil falls, something indescribable is revealed. The Sufis had a phrase for this: when the I died, who was there to tell the story? Rumi lived this total dissolution. In his words, you were wind in the wind, now you are wind and wind. And Tolle, in his experience on the park bench, the 3 veils dissolved simultaneously. First, the personal ego disappeared. Then the feeling of being a separate entity evaporated. And finally, even the notion of being a conscious someone dissolved. What remained wasn't emptiness. It was absolute fullness. It wasn't absence. It was total presence. And here's the secret that will change your life. This total presence is what you really are, always were, always will be. But how do you integrate this? How do you live from this understanding without losing yourself in spiritual psychosis? The mystics develop specific practices, not to achieve this realization because you already are this, but to remove the obstacles obscuring this truth. Teresa of Avila created the map of the 7 interior castles. Each castle represents a layer of identification that needs to be transcended. And in the central castle, in the Sanctum Sanctorum, she discovered there was no one there, only the divine presence itself, knowing itself. St. John of the Cross developed the method of the dark night, deliberately entering states where all familiar references disappear, where you can no longer rely on any known identity. And what they discovered, and what Eckhart Tolle confirmed, is that in these moments of total disidentification, real life finally begins. Because here's a truth that will blow your mind. You've never lived a single day of your life. Not really. Who lived was the character you created. The ego navigating through experiences, interpreting everything through the filter of personal history. But you, the real you, was always here, silently witnessing the drama unfold. And when you realize this, really realize it, not just understand it intellectually, something revolutionary happens. You stop trying to fix your life because you realize there was never anything broken. You stop seeking happiness because you recognize that you are the very happiness you were seeking. You stop trying to connect with God because you realize you are the movement of divine consciousness exploring itself through a human form. But beware, because there's a subtle trap here, a trap many spiritual seekers fall into. The trap is turning this understanding into yet another spiritual identity. I am pure consciousness. I have transcended the ego. I am awakened. Boom. You've just created the most subtle ego of all. The spiritual ego that identifies with non-identification. The true mystical masters knew this. That's why Meister Eckhart prayed, God, free me from God. Free me even from the idea of being someone who knows God. And Eckhart Tolle, he expresses this with perfect simplicity. The ego seeks. Presence simply is. Now you might be wondering, but what about relationships? What about responsibilities? How does this realization work in the real world? And that's the most important question. Because spirituality that doesn't translate into daily life is just sophisticated mental masturbation. Here's how the mystics lived this realization, and how Eckhart Tolle lives today. First, they stopped trying to be someone special. Paradoxically, upon realizing that their true nature is extraordinary, they became completely ordinary. Second, they developed what Zen Buddhists call a beginner's mind in everything. Each moment became fresh, new, unique, not filtered through past experiences. Third, they discovered that true love is not an emotion. It's the very texture of reality when seen without distortion. When the ego steps aside, love is what naturally remains. And fourth, they understood that service is not a moral choice. It's a spontaneous movement of consciousness, recognizing itself in all forms. Eckhart Tolle lives exactly like this. If you know him personally, the first thing you notice is his extraordinary ordinariness. There's no spiritual drama, no performative mystical aura, just simple, direct presence, without an agenda. And that's precisely what scares the ego. Because the ego wants dramatic spirituality. It wants special experiences, altered states, feelings of being chosen. But true realization is more radical than that. It's the perception that everything is sacred exactly as it is, including, and especially, the most mundane moments. Washing dishes becomes an experience of cosmic communion, not because you're doing something special, but because you stop filtering the experience through mental resistance. Working becomes a creative expression of consciousness, not because the work changed, but because you stopped identifying as someone who has to work. Relationships become spaces of mutual recognition. Not two people trying to get something from each other, but one consciousness, playfully being two people. And the problems? The real challenges of human life, they continue to appear. The difference is that you stop adding psychological suffering to practical suffering. Physical pain remains physical pain. But you stop creating the mental story that transforms pain into suffering. Financial challenges remain practical challenges to be solved. But you stop adding the drama of identifying as someone with financial problems. Difficult relationships continue to require wisdom and discernment. But you stop making it about your identity as someone who suffers in relationships. The mystics discovered that there's a crucial difference between responding to life and reacting to life. Reaction comes from the ego. It's automatic, based on conditioned patterns, filtered through personal history. Response comes from presence. It's spontaneous, appropriate to the moment, free from the weight of the past. And Eckhart Tolle is a master at demonstrating this difference. Watch any interview of him. See how he responds to questions. There's no rush to defend ideas. No need to be right. Just presence responding to what's happening now. But there's something even deeper. Something few realize about the truly realized. They discovered that there's no difference between spiritual life and ordinary life. Between sacred moments and profane moments. Between special states and ordinary states. Everything is a single breath of consciousness. Everything is the same divine movement expressing itself through infinitely varied forms. What changes is not life. It's the quality of attention you bring to life. And here we arrive at the last secret. The secret within the secret within the secret. The mystics discovered that even spiritual seeking is an illusion. Even the desire to awaken is a movement of the ego trying to perpetuate itself in a more subtle way. Because awakening is not something that happens to you. Awakening is the recognition that you were never asleep. Consciousness was never lost, never needed to be found. It merely temporarily forgot itself through identification with limited forms. And when that remembrance happens, when you recognize that you always were what you were looking for, something hilarious is revealed. All the spiritual seeking, all the years of practices, all the books, workshops, retreats, all the existential suffering. It was consciousness playing hide and seek with itself. It was God pretending to have forgotten that it was God. It was you playing the role of someone who needed to find themselves. And when you see this, when you really see, you can't stop laughing. Not a cynical chuckle, but pure, unadulterated joy. The joy of recognizing the cosmic joke you've always been a part of. The Sufis knew this. That's why Rumi was known for dancing and laughing so much. He'd seen the cosmic punchline. He'd realized that all the drama of separation was just consciousness having a good time. And Eckhart Tolle, if you pay attention, you'll notice he frequently smiles. Not a social smile, a performative smile, but a smile from someone who knows the secret. Someone who's seen through the illusion and found something infinitely lighter and more joyful on the other side. So, what's your next question? How do I get there? How do I achieve this realization? And there's the final trick. The question already contains the illusion, because there's no there to get to. There's no you that needs to achieve anything. There's only this moment, this consciousness reading these words, this presence that has always been here, will always be here, is eternally here. The secret the mystics guarded for 2,000 years isn't information, it's recognition. The recognition that you already are what you seek. And Eckhart Tolle, he simply points to the obvious, to what's always been in front of you, to what you always were, but were too busy searching to notice. You are this. You have always been this. And on some deep level, You've always known this. The rest is just remembering. When you truly absorb this, not just as a concept, but as a lived reality, your life becomes a spontaneous expression of gratitude. Not gratitude for something specific, but gratitude for existence itself. Because you finally understand, you're not a cosmic accident navigating a hostile universe. You are the universe knowing itself through human eyes. You're not having a spiritual experience. You are spirituality having a human experience. And when this becomes your lived reality, when you stop trying to become something and recognize what you already are, then you understand why the mystics guarded this secret for so long. Not because it was dangerous to know, but because it was impossible to believe until you lived it yourself. And now you know. The veil has been lifted. The secret has been revealed. What you do with this wisdom, well, that's between you and the infinite consciousness you truly are. But remember, this is no longer information for your spiritual collection. It's an invitation to stop collecting and to start being. The rest of your life can be lived from this recognition. Each breath a confirmation of who you truly are. Each moment an opportunity to embody the presence the mystics pointed to. You have the map. You always have. Because you are both the map and the territory, the seeker and the sought, the question and the answer. And that is the greatest revelation of all.